share that? Okay, you can make it full screen. You can put your laptop there.
Hello. Yeah, I think they're all on the way. Hello, hello. Morning, everyone. My name is Helen Onyaka, and I'm a co-deputy director of the Birmingham Institute for Sustainability and Climate Action, fondly known as BISCA. I'm also an associate professor in the School of Chemical Engineering, both at the University of Birmingham. It is a real pleasure and honor to welcome you to this session, Bridging Research and Policy for Global Climate Action. Here at the Science for Climate Pavilion at COP30 in Birmingham. We are gathered not only at a global climate conference, but in a region that is central to the health of our planet. What happens here in Belém and in the Amazon will echo far beyond Brazil. It will shape the stability, security, and sustainability of communities worldwide. Today's event, we will discuss our COP30 report and policy briefs developed to support decision makers at this critical moment. COP30 coincides with the 10-year anniversary of the Paris Agreement, a milestone that should prompt honest reflection, and bold action. This moment is not just for reflection, it's a moment for decisive, science-informed action. It calls us to assess our progress honestly. So where are we? And also to confront persistent barriers to implementation, renew our shared commitment to climate action rooted in justice and sustainability. Crucially, it calls us to elevate the role of research in shaping public discourse and policy. At the University of Birmingham, we are responding to this call. Our researchers are driving innovation in energy transition and decarbonization, climate adaptation and resilience, health and climate justice, sustainable finance, clean technologies, and biodiversity. We are embedding sustainability across our teaching and operations and preparing future global citizens to lead with a purpose. As a sign of this commitment, the QS University Sustainability Ranking places us in the top 3% of institutions globally, and currently 43rd in the whole world. But I want to be very clear about something. Generating knowledge is only part of the solution. If research remains in journals, on our bookshelves, it cannot change lives. That is why we have produced these reports and set of policy briefs. The core message is simple, but very powerful. Policymaking must be grounded in the best available evidence, co-created with those most affected, and designed for real-world implementation. Institutions like the University of Birmingham, therefore, have a dual role. Firstly, as knowledge creators, and secondly, as conveners, communicators, and catalysts for change. These briefs bring evidence to the forefront, showing how bold, coordinated, science-led policies can address some of today's pressing climate challenges. The national and international recommendations they contain are rooted in collaboration. The collaborations are between researchers, policymakers, industry, civil society, and communities on the front line of climate change. So, armed with the right evidence, the right policies, and the right partnership, we can strengthen our ecosystem, societal resilience, and advance sustainable developments. Our report is organized in 5 interconnecting policy briefs. First, adaptation and resilience. How we prepare communities, infrastructures, and ecosystems to withstand and recover from climate shocks. Secondly, sustainable education. How we equip the next generation with skills, values, and knowledge to drive climate solutions. Thirdly, decarbonization and an equitable transition. How we reduce emission while ensuring that the costs and benefits of the transition are shared fairly. Then we have equity, justice, and health. How we protect health, reduce inequalities, and uphold human rights in the face of climate impact. The last one is climate finance. How we mobilize and direct financial flow to where they are needed most, particularly in the vulnerable regions. Each of these areas is crucial, and critical. They are deeply interconnected. That means our solutions cannot be siloed. We need integrated, holistic approach that addresses mitigation, adaptation, justice, and finance all together. And this is exactly why we established the Birmingham Institute for Sustainability and Climate Action. BISCA is a cross-university collaborative platform designed to connect dynamic research network and foster partnership across diverse communities, sectors, and geographies. Through BISCA, we are working to bridge the gap between evidence and action, between what we know and what we do. So what are we hoping to achieve in this session today? Overall, our aim today is to encourage informed, constructive dialogue. We want to create a space where a diverse range of stakeholders, from scientists to the youth, policymakers, practitioners, community leaders, can explore how cutting-edge research can genuinely support government, businesses, and communities. In terms of the outcome, we hope that you will all live here with a deep understanding of how research can be translated into impactful policy. This session, we hope, will generate actionable ideas, not just abstract concepts. And also, we hope to promote the uptake and use of the university's newly launched policy briefs in national and international climate processes. And on your seats, you're going to see a copy of that policy brief. Please do take a copy with you. And we have the link online where you can download the e-copy. Do share it, please. Ultimately, our goal is to influence climate decision-making and contribute to a more sustainable and equitable future in the UK, in Brazil, and globally. We also recognize that this is not a one-way process. Bridging research and policy is not just about translating research into policy. It is about co-creating knowledge with policymakers, industry leaders, the youth, indigenous communities, and wider society. When we listen to this perspective, new research questions emerge, new priorities are identified, and better solutions are developed. So my invitation to you all here today is engage critically. Share your experiences and expertise. Challenge us as researchers to be more accessible, more relevant, and more responsive. Because if we act together with urgency and purpose, we will shape a more sustainable and equitable world for generations to come. I want to say again, thank you, every one of you, for being here today, for the work you're already doing, and for the contributions you make to this conversation. It is my pleasure to hand over to Professor Lisa Jabor, who is also a co-deputy director of the Birmingham Institute for Sustainability and Climate Action. Lisa will lead a panel discussion on the COP30 report and guide us through the key themes and recommendations in more detail. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Helen. I'm sorry for this. So as Helen said, my name is Lisa Jabor. I'm a professor of international economics at the University of Birmingham, and I'm also deputy director of the Birmingham Institute for Sustainability and Climate Action. And it's my pleasure to lead this panel discussion around our COP30 report, Bridging Research and Policy for Climate Action. I would like to thank all the panelists here in the room. We're still missing someone who just landed at Birmingham Airport, but he will be here. and online. First, I would like to invite Hadil Tuhiri. Hadil is a fourth-year medical student at the University of Birmingham and an Immerse Amazonia summer school attendee. She is here to share her reflections on the importance of giving young people a meaningful voice in shaping climate action and representing the voice of youth. Hadil, over to you.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. My name's Hadil, and I'm a current medical student at the University of Birmingham. So this summer, I had a really privileged opportunity of going out into the Amazon along with 7 other students from different disciplines within the university. And our aim was to explore the impacts that climate change was having on Indigenous communities within the Amazon, and also sort of trying to bring underrepresented voices in climate change matters to light. So this experience has really reshaped the way I've understood medicine and my profession. It's more than just, a basic framework of diagnoses and practical skills, but it's volatile, it's changing, and it's deeply connected to the environment and culture. And the decisions that are being made here today at COP are going to have direct implications on the healthcare systems internationally, whether that's resource allocation, how care is tailored and adapted. But for too long, global health has been sort of influenced by colonial agendas, and Indigenous people or communities like the youth who tend to be underrepresented continue to be. And that's why it's really important that we're here to provide that alternative voice and sort of redefine that relationship between climate and health. So when I was out in the Amazon, I went to a part of the Amazon in Brazil called Cachoeira. And I was able to reflect on sort of the paternalistic influence that developed nations had in these regions and within the global south. And it was more about sort of serving local interests than sort of fostering equal platforms of knowledge exchange and cultural competence. And reflecting this back in the UK, this also was sort of, it fell within a hidden curriculum in UK medical school teaching. We rely a lot on scientific models of Western medicine compared to sort of the more local policies that the communities out in Cachoeira sort of adopted. And climate action has sort of reflected this power imbalance framework. So at COP, decisions about emissions, climate action, pollution and biodiversity are also sort of decisions about respiratory diseases, malnutrition, and infectious outbreaks. So it's all very interconnected. And the vulnerabilities that I saw in the Cachoeira community sort of mirror the vulnerabilities that I see in marginalized communities in the NHS and in the UK, such as, the rise of pollution in urbanized cities like Birmingham, like UK, sort of inadequate housing and limited access to green spaces. And going out into the Amazon, I realized that it's not just a nice sort of picturesque backdrop. The Amazon in itself acts as a rainforest, and the Amazon sort of provides the resources to sustain communities there, whether it's through sort of medicinal plants or sort of food uses. And when I was out there, I could see that climate change was having a direct impact on the Indigenous communities there already. For example, there's an increase in heat waves, increases in pollution, and this also all increased the impacts of respiratory diseases in the community, such as rising levels of childhood asthma, and also destroyed sort of medicinal plants, which the communities had relied on. So in the UK, climate change is still framed as an environmental concept, but I think in the Amazon, it's more important than that. It's a clinical issue. And what I saw in the Amazon didn't just sort of reinforce that medicine isn't just about diagnosing conditions. It's sort of understanding the social determinants that underpin sort of why people come in. Okay. So a big part of my experience in the Amazon was working with Brazilian students. So there were 24 students in total, 8 from the University of Birmingham, and the rest were both Brazilian and indigenous. And my group went out to explore the impacts that climate change was having on the health of the population. So there was a big emphasis on sort of co-creation with local communities, integrating biomedical knowledge that is our sort of educational backgrounds with cultural practices. And this differs a lot from the policy-based approaches in the UK. So we were able to learn about the population's use of natural remedies. So they use things like chicory roots, which are used to relieve the symptoms of headaches and coughs. And this was crucial in the community's response to COVID-19. And at the end of the experience, we produced a video. And it made me reflect on how news underreporting internationally can skew the perceptions and the scale of specific healthcare needs that these communities require. And you know, the NHS is one of the largest public sector greenhouse emitter in the UK, but it's also the first health system in the world to commit to net zero. So although we're not seeing the impacts of climate change firsthand yet, the Western world doesn't remain immune. So going to the Amazon has made me realize that environmental literacy is, you know, a core medical principle and not just a niche interest. And it's really important that I'm here today, other health professionals are here today, and we've got a WHO presence, because we should be part of the climate conversation, not simply as sort of spectators. We should actively engage as stakeholders within this. And I know as a future doctor that the patients I will see in the UK will feel the consequences of sort of the decisions that are being made here in COP30.
Thank you very much. This is very interesting and inspiring. And I'll go back to you perhaps with some questions at the end. But now I would like to invite Professor David Hanna. David is a Deputy Pro-Vice Chancellor for Sustainability at the University of Birmingham, and he's Director of BISCA. He's Professor of Hydrology and UNESCO Chair in Water Science at the University of Birmingham. His research explores how the water cycle works and how it is changing in relation to climate, people, and other drivers of change. We just heard from Hadil about the importance of climate literacy and how essential it is. So David, it's a great segue to your intervention about your thoughts on the critical role of sustainability education in the context of climate change, of climate action. Over to you.
Thanks, Lisa, and good afternoon to everyone in Belém, or good morning or good evening, wherever you're joining us from worldwide. So as Lisa said, I'm David Hanna. Warm greetings from the University of Birmingham on a very chilly day. And I'm really pleased to be joining this panel in the Science for Climate Action Pavilion, and happy to do so online. I had the privilege earlier in the year of being in Brazil twice for COP30 related activities, and that was particularly notable because 2025 marks the 200th anniversary of UK-Brazil diplomatic relations. So today is really wonderful to participate in this important panel event to bring together researchers, policymakers, hopefully in the room business leaders and also civil society, to discuss how we can leverage scientific knowledge to guide more ambitious, fair, equitable and effective climate actions through policy and other engagements. So in these opening remarks, I'm going to focus specifically on the importance of sustainability education and the connections with the youth voice. So my comments are based upon our policy brief, which is about teaching the world a greener way, and it's part of our COP30 report. The work is led by Professor Julia Myatt, who's the Director of Sustainability Education at the University of Birmingham. But this work was done in collaboration with a range of academics and also our Guild for Students. Our sustainability education brief, like all the policy briefs, makes bold but also actionable UK, national scale and international policy recommendations that you can read in more detail. And I think Helen was noting there's copies of the report in the room, as well as the QR codes that you can scan. So why does sustainability education matter, and what do we need to do? Well, education, I think, as Hadil just showed very well, is one of the most powerful tools we've got to address climate change. But it's not just about teaching facts. Climate literacy is no longer optional. It's essential for every citizen, for every profession, and for every sector. It's also about shaping mindsets, inspiring action, and preparing future leaders to navigate the world in transition. Sustainability education really goes far beyond environmental awareness. It's about understanding the interconnectedness between environmental, social, and economic systems. And at the University of Birmingham, and also through global frameworks such as UNESCO's Education for Sustainable Development, we've been advocating embedding sustainability across all levels of learning, from primary or elementary schools all the way up to higher education. And we need curricula that equip students not only with knowledge, but the ability to think critically, innovatively, and collaboratively as we move towards solutions. This also means training the educators and creating pathways towards green careers and ensuring sustainability is not a specialist subject, but a shared responsibility. I spoke 3 weeks ago in Sao Paulo as part of a UK-Brazil dialogue hosted by the UK Embassy and also University of Sao Paulo, USP. And there I talked about the fact that education is also very important as a diplomatic tool for research and turning research and knowledge into action. When we host international students, that builds long-term goodwill, it results in future diplomatic ties, and scholarship programs promote leadership and also strong cultural exchange. Our educational systems and how we work between the global north and global south are really important in terms of exporting values around democracy, human rights, and sustainability, but also fostering academic diplomacy through joint degrees and through our global campuses. As tangible examples and work we're doing at University of Birmingham, you've already heard from Hadil very eloquently about the British Council-funded Immerse Amazonia summer school based in Cachuana Forest Scientific Station in Pará State, which ran this summer. And it's fantastic to have some of our students, through University of Birmingham students, attending COP30. You know, when we connect between classrooms in Birmingham and communities in the Amazon, we're creating a dialogue that really transcends borders, shares perspectives on important issues around biodiversity, climate justice, and sustainable futures. I'm also really pleased that on the panel today, we've got some British Council-funded Engage Amazonia Early Career Fellowships, and we're hosting 4 people connected with the Brazilian Amazon to be for 1 year working in the University of Birmingham, working on really diverse topics around forests, health, and aspects of biodiversity. So you'll hear from them, and it's absolutely fantastic to be connecting with them. So moving from educational activities to thinking about how we connect with the youth voice more broadly. So why is the youth voice so important? It's perhaps the most powerful tool we've got for change. It's the rise of the youth movements, entrepreneurship, and civil society that's really going to drive change by pushing boundaries in terms of transparency, sustainability, and equity, whilst at the same time reshaping what we mean by climate action and how we develop and think about doing that through diplomatic means. This is because young people, and I realize I'm not a young person giving this talk, are not just learners, they're absolutely the leaders. They bring voices that are urgent, creative, and importantly, for some work we've done at the University of Birmingham, hopeful about some of the climate conversations that we can have. So initiatives like Immerse Amazonia, like Engage Amazonia, and the youth panels that you will have seen this week at COP30 really provide us with a strong platform to think about how students and youth voices can shape policy and challenge the norms. Empowering youth through education is very important, and we must provide platforms to speak, tools to act, and confidence to lead, because this is the generation that will be living with the consequences of decisions that are made at COP30 and those that have been made in the past. So it's not about listening, it's about providing action. It's not a courtesy, it's a necessity to hear youth voices and think about sustainability education. So to close, I think sustainability education must be the foundation for just and resilient futures and for the dealing with the issues around climate change. We need to absolutely amplify youth voices to ensure that solutions are, as you've heard from Hadil already, inclusive, innovative, and future focused. So let's make sure that we commit in terms of embedding sustainability in every classroom, but also in every conversation, and ensure that youth voices are not just heard, but they lead the way. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And now we will hear from Dr. Flavia Santana. Flavia is a tropical forest ecologist at the National Institute for Amazonian Research and one of our Engage Amazonia fellow at the University of Birmingham. She's studying biodiversity, ecological interactions, and nutrient and carbon cycling in Amazonian forests. Flavia will reflect on the role of forests and biodiversity in building adaptation and resilience to climate change. Over to you, Flavia.
Thank you. Everybody's hearing me?
Thank you, I'm muted.
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
So nice, yeah. So thank you for the invitation. It's really nice to have here all of you to discuss about this bridging and connections. And talking about that, my main research is about biodiversity, but not only that, it's about interactions, ecology interactions. So every organism is linked to the other things, although through this wide range of interactions. So these interactions such as predation, competition, mutualism, symbiosis, it takes into account how the forests respond to different climate drivers. Yes. So despite of this, much of the public and policy discussions surrounding the biodiversity and crisis continues to focus primarily on species loss. While these species extinctions are undeniable important, these perspectives overlooks other critical dimension, the loss of ecological interactions. So biodiversity encompasses not only the number of species, but also the network of relationships that connect them and support ecosystem dynamics. So the key point is that the ecological interactions can disappear even if the species involved remain present. So for example, plant species may persist in a forest, but its pollinators and seed dispersers declines, its functional whole is significantly reduced. This means that the ecosystem can be to lose essential process well before any species is formally classified as endangered and extinction. So this is illustration, for example, from Marley and colleagues. It's showing how these Anthropocene bottlenecks highlights how human impacts, regardless from the deforestation to hunt and land use change, can drastically reduce populations and fragment interaction networks, having different outcomes of ecosystems. So understanding these interaction networks is therefore essential for predicting ecosystem response to environment change, whether driven by habitat loss, climate change, or elevated CO2. And speaking of elevated CO2 effects on the forest, I've been working in the Amazon Face program, which we are launching now in the COP30, the beginning of the experiment. That is putting extra CO2 on the forest and analyzing how the forest will respond to that. So in Amazon Face program, we have the science plan when we have 6 different research areas, and one of these research areas is biodiversity, and this includes of course the interactions. So I've been working in the study site of Amazon Face for almost 7 years, and my main research questions is about how these interaction networks, these interactions, it's impacting the water, carbon, nutrient cycles, and how they are tightly linked across different stratas of the forests. So from cleanup to understory and forest floors, leaves intercept rainfall, influence water availability, while photosynthesis in the cleanup drives carbon fixation and supports energy flow to herbivores and decomposers. So nutrients released from the leaf litter and root exudates through the microbial activity in the soil, which turns regulates the nitrogen and phosphorus availability for plants. So all those biogeochemical cycles are not as isolated. So they are deeply interconnected with the ecological interactions, for instance, pollinators, food dispersers, herbivores, and predators. So my main research is related to those interactions. So try to understand not only the impact of the elevated CO2 and how this is going to impact the nutrient cycles and carbon cycles, but also how the nutrient limitation that we have in the forest and of phosphorus, and also how this is going to impact the nitrogen cycle. So in that direction, in the platform of the fellowship, the Engage Amazonia Fellowship, I've been working with Professor Samiula from the University of Birmingham, try to understand the nitrogen cycle responses to the increasing CO2 and how the assessment of this soil organic matter decomposition and also the biological nitrogen fixation is meeting the three nitrogen demands for potentially upregulating the N2O emissions under future climates, which is other important greenhouse gas. So this is me and Professor Samiula in Bifor phase facilities and also in the Amazon phase facility. So we had been before together. And also speaking about interactions ecology, I believe that it's not the best way to pathway towards the resilience and adaptation to climate change is grounded in the ecological interactions, but this should not be limited to only non-human organisms. Building bridges is essential for moving our discussions forward, but we must also recognize and learn from the bridges that the forest peoples have been built and maintained for thousands of years, while we conserve the highest level of biodiversity on the planet. So on that, I would like to thank you and welcome to having questions.
Thank you, Flavia. And it's really inspiring to see those pictures of you and Sami working in the two phase experiments. And it shows clearly the importance of science collaboration and the role of science in driving climate action. So I'll hand over now to Dr. Adriana Oliveira. Adriana is an Engage Amazonia Fellow as well at the University of Birmingham. She holds a PhD in medical sciences from the University of Sao Paulo and is a medical doctor from the Federal University of Amazonia. A radiologist with the Manaus Municipal Health Department and a researcher with Breathe Well South America. Adriana will talk about global health imperatives in the context of climate change, driving on her first-hand experience. Over to you, Adriana.
Good afternoon, Belém, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adriana Oliveira, and it's an honor to speak with you today. I was born and raised in Manaus, in the heart of Amazon. Although I am currently based in University of Birmingham, my roots are deeply anchored in the Amazon region. I completed my medical training in Manaus. I lived in the state of Rondônia, and I have family in the state of Acre. Over the years, I have lived in Altazes, Maués, and Humaitá. These experiences... Ah, não?
Tá mostrando lá. É melhor você tirar da tela aí.
Sorry. I will stop sharing my computer screen. So, I'm sorry. How can I share my screen right now?
Agora você bota ali embaixo na apresentação. E aí, na apresentação. Aí. Agora tá tudo bem.
So these are pretty much photos that I took from my cell phone, just for let you know that I am a really Amazonian citizen. So as an Amazonian, I experienced firsthand the historic droughts from 2023 and 2024. During those years, the dry season brought unprecedented levels of smoke that made the air in Manaus almost unbreathable for some days in 2 consecutive years. What began as an environmental crisis quickly became a public health emergency for the entire city. We saw significant rise in medical consultations and hospital admissions, particularly for respiratory diseases. For many people, the fear in 2024 was that this would become our new normal. Fortunately, the dry season of this year brought some relief. The meteorological forecasts proved accurate, and the season was considerably less severe. We did not see the alarming pollution levels that had affected us so dramatically in the previous years, but the memory remains refreshed, reminding us that the climate change is not a distant concept. It is a lived experience that shapes the health and well-being of millions of people. Here in Birmingham, I contribute to Breathe Well South America Project, a multi-center collaboration funded by the NIHR. This initiative links Brazil, Peru, and Argentina, and the United Kingdom in a shared mission to improve primary care for COPD in contexts of social inequality and vulnerable populations. The research activities in Manaus are conducted through a collaboration led by University of São Paulo under the leadership of Professor Paulo Lotufo, locally by the Federal University of Amazonas, represented by Professor Socorro Cardoso from the Department of Pneumology of Getúlio Vargas Hospital, and Professor Teótrefes Fernandes. The partnership in Manaus is also supported by Municipal Health Department, SEMSA, particularly in the Parque das Tribos Primary Care Unit. That is the largest urban concentration of non-village indigenous people in the world. That area is home of 35 different indigenous ethnic groups, as well as neighboring communities living in conditions of social vulnerability. Our scientific approach is centered on active data collection across all levels of care, from patients and their family caregivers to the family health teams who visit them at home, also the primary care staff, the local managers, and the policymakers. Our aim is to co-develop feasible care pathways adapted to local realities and to conduct an exploratory model-based economic evaluation. In other words, we want to ensure that what is designed in partnership is not only scientifically robust, but also practical, sustainable, and meaningful to the people it's meant to serve. Within the overlapping context of climate change and global health, identifying both local risk factors and global risk factors is essential. Some interventions can be implemented at the community or regional level, with others require global dialogue and international cooperation. The severe droughts that we experienced in 2023 and 2024 made it clear that climate-related events, whether driven by global emission or local use practices, can dramatically reshape the lives of Amazonian people. Understanding these chains of impact is fundamental for safeguarding public health. In addition, we are engaged in another initiative, the Aero Saúde cohort. This is a multicentric effort to follow over 6,000 individuals from across all states of northern Brazil. The objective is to evaluate risk factors and improve indicators for non-communicable diseases, particularly cardiovascular diseases, which remain the leading cause of death in our region. This long-term study will help us better understand the health profiles of Amazonian populations and inform more effective interventions. So taken together, these experiences show us that the health impacts of climate change can be mitigated, but only with high-quality science, sustained cooperation, and health strategies that are designed to be implemented within context of deep social inequality. The Amazon is also our home, our identity, and the foundation of our well-being. Protecting the health of Amazonian people is inseparable from protecting the forest itself. Climate resilience, equity, and scientific collaboration must go hand in hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adriana. And while we wait for our final speaker, I'm gonna just ask a few questions. First, Ariel, to start with you, you mentioned, and it links what Adriana was saying about health, and you've mentioned something interesting about, you know, not neglecting indigenous knowledge and the systems of health that indigenous people or local communities across the world may have developed over over years. So as a medical student, how would you like to see this type of information integrated or embedded within your studies, or, you know, at least being made aware of their importance?
Thank you. I think when it comes to indigenous knowledge being sort of transferred, I think the key thing to start with is to preserve it. At the minute, you know, cultural knowledge is not preserved within the communities, and it's slowly dying out through the generations. I think the problem with the westernized healthcare system is all about resource allocation. Going out to the Amazon, you know, being in such a remote, geographically isolated location sort of means that cultural inbuilt community knowledge is critical to preserving traditions and the health of the communities there, because the nearest healthcare facilities are hours and hours away. So it's just having that cultural competence, I think, as a medical student, is how you know, traditions should be incorporated. I think I have done sort of medical missions abroad. So I went to a rural community to set up a medical clinic in Panama, for example. And that was the first time the community had received sort of an organized healthcare system there. And I think going there, I wasn't sort of aware of many of the cultural keys, the cultural practices and the customs that these communities sort of believed in and faced. And so the whole knowledge of pharmaceuticals and vaccinations was a very new concept to them. So it's more about accepting each one of our, you know, different backgrounds and incorporating that. So it's more, I'd say, preservation and ensuring that we, from an outsider's perspective, understand that and work to bridge that.
Thank you. And Adriana, you know, this links in some way to what you were saying. And also earlier, we were at a different event, women of leaders of the forest. And one leader was talking about her experience in COVID-19. She lives in the Amazonian forest, and she was deploring the lack of, at the time, of availability of healthcare and how the community felt that they were at the front line of preserving the health of the community. So while it is important to integrate and preserve local knowledge, can you say a little bit more about the importance of actually getting access to healthcare, you know, a broader system of healthcare to all communities and not keeping communities disconnected and left behind?
Well, so in Brazil, we have an organized system that is found to be like a pyramid. So we have primary care, and this base is formed by the primary care units that are distributed through an area. And specifically for Parque das Tribos, there is a primary care unit that is totally linked to a non-village indigenous people. So they are indigenous, but they are not at forest. So they are not covered by the regular indigenous health system. For indigenous that live inside the forest, we have a different pathway for health system. And for them that lives inside the city, outside the forest, we have this kind of mixed or hybrid primary care unit that can offer health care to them. So in this particular primary care unit, they are supposed to deal with these special people, and also they have other research projects running over there in which they can also take part on the herbs and other traditional thoughts that they have and use this as medicine for this special population. So in Manaus, we have this specialty that is done, that is running at Parque das Tribos. But there are other groups of indigenous people that does not live close to Parque das Tribos. So they can have healthcare through other primary care units, but they will be enrolled in the regular Brazilian health system called SUS.
Okay, thank you. Flavia, you talked about in your presentation about the importance of, you know, looking at adaptation and resilience from looking at the interconnection between the different systems and binding them together, or looking from a holistic perspective. Can you tell us a little bit more, especially when it comes to your, in your field of work, how this interconnectedness takes shape and why is it so important?
So yeah, so when we discussed about this climate change and the and how the trajectory of the forest, it's important that we have the entity. So we are in this most diversity forest in the world, right? But at the same time, we are not looking into those interactions ecologies, and most of them, they are related to important services that the forest provides to us. So when we are talking about food production, when we are talking about health, so Haley talked about the medicines as well. Adriana talked about the natural medicines. So all of that, it's kind of ecosystem service that the forests are providing for us, and this passes through the ecological interactions. So if you are not understanding, for instance, the medicines, part of the medicines, they are chemical defenses of the plants that they are producing to defend by the herbivores. but at the same time that are using in somehow for medicines. So if we don't understand that, this type of basic relationship between the organisms in the forest, we can also do not understand really good the ecosystem services that the forests can provide to us. At the same time, if we are not understanding the pollination system, and if we are losing the partners of the pollination process in the forest, we can lose food production. So if we are not able to tackle the importance of the forest to the food cultures that we have, and if we are using pesticides that it's killing pollinators and seed dispersants, we are breaking the chain of food production. So I think that these basic studies on ecological interactions that we maybe are not so putting so much effort on understand that, or we need to pay attention to relate that with big ecosystem services that the forest is providing to us. And it's important to maintaining the forest and the resilience of the forest as well.
Thank you. And David, I know I asked you about education, but your expertise is in water, and perhaps you could share some thoughts about the importance of water systems in adaptation and resilience, and also in climate in general, in adapting to climate change.
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. So water, I've often referred to as the climate connector. So it's the connection between how most people experience the impacts of climate changes through the water cycles, through floods, droughts, and through water quality extremes. And we know those extremes are becoming more extreme as we warm our planet. So linked to many things we've heard already, a real critical part about adaptation and building resilience is going from these large global issues to the impacts upon local communities and thinking about how we provide appropriate sort of adaptation solutions. So we've been working for some time with communities in high mountain environments and also in high latitude environments. So these are in snow and ice covered environments where we've been embedding new sensor technologies, but also using the indigenous knowledge about what these communities knows about how water operates within their environment to come up with much more tractable solutions and solutions which we can adopt through something called adaptive governance. So we've been working, just to give you an idea of the regions, in Arctic Canada, in the far north, and Nunavut. We've been working in the Nepalese Himalayas and in India, and indeed some of this work has been funded by the World Meteorological Organization. So there we've been using new lower cost sensor technologies to measure rainfall and to measure water level, but then working with the local communities to think about how we can develop much more inclusive early warning systems, and particularly thinking about how we get information to women and girls within those communities, because they often are some of the most vulnerable groups, but also in many of those environments make many of the decisions around how sort of water is used. So I think one of the key things, one of the perhaps the takeaway messages from the session is that we really need to think about how we go from these global issues, whether that's around health, whether that's around biodiversity change, but think about what that means at the community level. But importantly, also what we can learn from those communities in terms of providing much more equitable and fair solutions, plus not forgetting that much of that, what we call indigenous knowledge, local knowledge, is just another form of information. It's not all about information that we can get from data loggers or from genetic sequencing or all these types of technologies. There's so much information encoded and held within those communities.
Okay, and so we are in the second week of COP. There are 2 days left, so today and 2 more days. And I would like, and you know, as we wrap up this event, ask each panelist what they hope this COP will achieve. So what would be a landmark declaration or commitment that they would like to see happening? So I'll start first with Helen here, who started us off.
All right, thank you so much, Lisa. For me, it's all about food. I don't want food and food systems to be, a side comment, because food contributes tremendously to climate emission on one hand, and also it's quite vulnerable to climate shocks. For example, if there was flooding or drought or wildfires that come across because of climate shocks, our food prices would increase. It's going to be a spike. You have more people that are vulnerable that wouldn't have access to food. So for me, what I would like to see is food taking a big stage on conversations and on mitigation. Thank you.
So for me, I'd like a bigger focus and a wider focus on health representation within climate change. Health needs to remain a fundamental topic. It is going to be one of the biggest things affected by climate change, and it's currently under research. I'd say a big thing that will come out is the impacts of climate migration and the sort of burden that could have on our healthcare systems internationally. So I think a focus on the effects of climate migration and health is what is an outcome that I'd like to see discovered this week.
Thank you. Flavia?
So I think that we need to have practical discussions about how to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gas. So we really need to talk how locally we can reduce all these global chain that sometimes we are using, that it can be more, that can be enhanced in locally, talking about interactions. So we've increased the interactions between the local actors in different sectors of the society, and get stronger these connections and these systems, we can be less dependent of the abroad services and abroad products. So I think that we needed to take more actions in that direction to be more local, and then in that sense we are talking about to reduce those emissions caused by transports and caused by big movements that we need to do in order to function as a society. So I think that I really would glad to hear from the people in the other level, talking about the practical activities that we can, strategies that we can have in this sense.
Thank you. Adriana?
Well, from the global health perspective, I would love to have a guide for what to do for my population to go through this climate change. I would like to know if we should have another policy setting. I would love to know if this is our new normal. I would love to know what we can do about this vulnerable population that suffer too much when the river is down. They got isolated. They have more diseases. They cannot have food, as our colleague said. They do not have access to vaccines because logistical things in Amazon got very, very difficult for us. So the climate changing is changing directly our lives, and I would love to have a guide for what to do from now on.
Thank you. And this resonates a lot with what we've been hearing across the different events and pavilions here at COP. Someone said the other day that there are no such things as vulnerable people. There are people who are put in vulnerable positions, and it's our collective responsibility to make sure that they have access to health and to food and shelter. Thank you. David, what would you like to see agreed or declared or achieved at this COP?
Thanks, Lisa. I think there's three broad brush topics that this COP needs to do, because we've got to remember this is the anniversary COP 10 years on from the Paris Agreement. So I'll give you those three broad brush ideas and then one specific action I think that resonates across all the discussions we've had on this panel. So the first thing is to strengthen national commitments and accelerate reduction in emissions. It's as simple as that. Secondly is to protect, and even better, to restore nature. And thirdly is to think about areas of climate finance. Yeah, and those are the three things I think that we urgently need. As an example, I think of the approaches that we've talked about this afternoon are all about systemic risk and joining things up, thinking about inclusivity and the role of education, whether that's new knowledge and research or communicating that knowledge through all the way to policymakers. So one area I would love to see shift is to pull in more One Health concepts into climate action plans, to think about links between environmental, physical, and mental health and well-being, and to think about how we can consider those effectively in relation to climate change mitigation, but also the adaptation efforts. And to do that in a way that we think not about what's often referred to as unintended consequences of making decisions, but thinking about the mutual benefits of making decisions. How can some of the choices we make that protect the environment and restore nature also help with greenhouse gas emissions and also help with the health and well-being? And we need governments to be brave. We need intergovernmental sort of cooperation for that, to realize this is a global issue, but we need to pull in the communities at the sharp end that are the most at risk to some of these changes, and really change the narrative to thinking about what some of the positive mutual benefits of working in a One Health concept might be.
Thank you. And a final question to the panel. Climate action is an everyday process. It doesn't only happen 2 weeks in a year when there is COP. COP is important, but we need to keep advocating, keep researching, and keep sharing that message across all year round. So what I would like to hear from the panel is some thoughts about how can we, as and bringing back to the title of this session, how can we as researchers, as students, make sure that engage with politicians, and not just politicians, stakeholders at various levels, to share that message, to bring in those practical solutions that you were talking about, and make sure that they are taken on board and scaled up and implemented. Helen, would you like to say a few words on this?
Thank you so much. Our brief argues that to keep people safe in the world that is really experiencing climate change, like the heat here is unbelievable, we must put adaptation, food security, health, and governance at the center of climate policy. We also highlighted that we are off track for the Paris goal, that climate risk is unevenly distributed, and that current adaptation finance is far below what is needed. We are set, to drive this, and the only way I see is through collaboration. The climate impact is affecting everyone. It's not just for third world country, it's everyone. Even in the UK, for example, we have lots of people that are food poor, that require food. And not just food, but they're feeling the impact in other ways. So my take on this is collaboration is key. We need to translate the research we're doing in the lab. For example, I'm a food microbiologist, and I do quite a lot of experiments on sustainable food systems. How can we ensure that we have food that is more sustainable and also can withstand the climate shocks? And there's so many exciting experiments we're doing in the lab. But then how can we bring this into fruition? The only way we can do that is by communicating, working together, co-creating solutions, and also making sure that research impact is felt, not just, in like I said earlier in my address, not just on bookshelves, on journals, but making real world impact. And this can only happen when we work together with policymakers, with researchers, with, the community. So that's quite important that we come together to co-create solutions to mitigate the impact of climate change. So that's my take on this. Thank you.
I think for me, the UK is so geographically distant from the Amazon. We have a lot of preconceptions and assumptions of the Amazon from a lay perspective. And then that just boils down to potentially a lack of education on such issues within our curriculums. And then once again, if we're more informed, then that can better help our generation and the next generation to promote and tailor policies based on that educational knowledge gained. And I guess that's why we're out here representing the University of Birmingham as youth, because we need to be educated and we need to educate others when we're back about the importance of this. So that's where it starts, I think.
Thank you, Adriana. How do you, in your perspective, how we should engage with policymakers, stakeholders to make sure that climate action is progressing all the time, and those voices that we that need a space on the table are actually given that space?
This is an issue. Give voices to the ones who are suffering. For us, it's difficult to have dialogue with policymakers because we feel that everything is stuck and nobody wants to move anywhere. Like, it's not my fault. It's not Brazilian fault. It's not other government fault. It's a global thing. So the problem that has different actors, none is responsible, totally responsible. So it's difficult to make things, make justice. So for us in Manaus, we have imported different solutions from the hot waves, the stay-at-home policy that we had in the last smoke season, in 2023 and 24, led to child to stay at home. And this could be a solution for other country. But for us, for example, these people that stayed at home, these children also did not eat because they eat the food from the school. So they were supposed to stay at home, breathing that polluted air and without eating anything. So for us, from our perspective of a low-income country, would it be better if the politicians would sustain the classes and put air filters inside the school? Because in this place, they could breathe a better air and not to be exposed to the smoke that we have. So sometimes we need to hear from the people that is suffering what more than the ones that can prevent themselves of suffering the consequences of climate change. So I think I agree with you that give voices is an issue for us.
Thank you so much. And Flavia, a couple of minutes, maybe 1 minute.
So
Yeah,
1 minute, really quickly.
or two.
I think that we everybody here, my colleagues, just covered most of the important things. I think that it has to come to pass by the educations and of course the local empowerment of the people. And I think that as a scientist, one thing that I'm really enthusiastic is to change language, so connecting science and art, for instance. So to have more cultural discussions, different aspects of the science can be discussed in a cultural base. And this is kind of how local people and regular people and general public can access really important information through different languages, so outside the scientific language. So I think that education integrated with the cultural actions to communicate its science, and it's very, very important. And this can give power to the local people to start the small movements towards the pressing to give pressure to put pressure on the politicians. So I think it's important.
Thank you so much. And David?
I think many of the key points have been made. I mean, I would say, and recognizing we're coming up to time, that what we're doing, what we're seeking to do with our policy briefs as part of COP30 and the work of the Birmingham Institute for Sustainability and Climate Action is to make sure the best evidence is used to make the best decisions. So we need to do, as Helen said, to unsilo the knowledge across different scientific areas, across business, across different parts of government, and particularly with local communities. We need to then make that information available. And as the power of language is critical there, and thinking about theories of change. So what's that knowledge going to be used for, and where does it get us to? And where we can, we should do that in multilateral frameworks, through things like the United Nations, like UNESCO from a science and education perspective, to make sure that we learn between the global south, across the global south, and to the global north, and think about the models we can use there. But I think it really is all about co-production of the best knowledge to move into the best policy to make the best decision. So unsiloing mutual understanding is key.
Thank you so much to all the panelists here and online in the UK, and thank you for coming to listen to us, whether online or in person. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.